No to ciekawa taka wojna.
O czym nie wiemy, że jakaś wojna o nas była, bo nam nie powiedzieli o tym.
Betul to jest bitwa właściwie. No. Także wiesz. Takie, proszę Państwa, będzie betul. Aż się trzęsie. Aż się trzęsie, proszę Państwa. Dzisiaj na 7 już zdaje się, tak, września, 7 września 2014 roku. No powolutku będziemy się już, proszę Państwa, starzeć. Mamy już 7 września 2014 roku Radio Conchita. Radio Tok FM Euro Conchita Extra. Witamy Państwa serdecznie. Proszę kupić sobie Dextran. Proszę kupić sobie Dextran. Hitler zrobił dyskotekę, wiesz, bo zaczął z rewolwerów strzelać, a Kryśka zaczęła tańczyć twista. Ale dyskoteka była, proszę Państwa. O, dzisiaj na 7 września mamy dyskotekę. Dyskoteka. Oczywiście, że się powinno powiedzieć dyskoteka albo dyskoteka, także proszę sobie wybrać, ale myślę, że to słowo w ogóle nie jest warte świeczki. No, tak poważne to słowo, że dyskoteka, tak. No bo jak ta Paradowska mówi, wiecie co, jako polityczka mówi polityka, no to przecież o czym my to będziemy mówić?
Tu właśnie masz wyjaśnienie, skąd się wziął Obama.
No.
Mars. No bo na bazie Donać.
Obama, proszę Państwa.
No tak, bo facet znikąd.
No.
Ze sfałszowanym.
Znikąd, tak. Także proszę Państwa, dzisiaj będzie na temat Obamy, który się nie wiadomo skąd po prostu wziął, no pojawił, bo ci co tej Biblii nie czytali, to nie wiedzą, że to się w Biblii ludzie rodzą, a tu on przyleciał z Marsa. I teraz tak, czy on ładny, czy on brzydki, ale mówią, że żeby był brzydki, to by ta żona go nie chciała. A ona jest piękna jak noc, proszę Państwa. No ale on już ją miał wcześniej, te córki. Tak, wcześniej się porodziły. Tak, no to zgłoś troszeczkę, tak ciut.
In 1943, the neutral press printed some strange news about an apocalyptic experimental American bomb that had destroyed every living thing on a small island during its first test. The facts as reported were not true, but the rumors were based on concrete data or on the first rare leaks that were coming out concerning the frenzied preparation of the super-secret atomic center at Oak Ridge, a kind of science fiction before the proper time. 2 years later, vague references to unknown, large-scale phenomena, a deafening roar and a column of smoke that had been noted in the desert region of New Mexico, appeared in some Texas and Arizona newspapers. Mass hallucination or meteor, the military authorities declared brusquely. Then it was learned that precisely at 5:38 a.m. on July 16, 1945, under the code name Trinity, the first American atomic bomb had been detonated on the top of a high steel tower a dozen or so miles from the airbase at Alamogordo. We learned of the existence of the A-bomb at the same time the Japanese did, the surprised citizens of the United States explained.
Obama.
Bo
And it was
Obama jest z Marsa,
perfectly
nie
true.
Tak.
z Ziemi. Dlatego taki dziwny on jest.
Taki dziwny jest, tak. Obama?
Taki jakby z innej planety.
Tak, tak. I teraz będą się zastanawiać, czy Obama to jest nasza mama.
These days, rumors abound that this same military-industrial conglomerate has established bases on Mars. Such claims sound like preposterous urban legend nonsense, right? But just like the atomic bomb in 1945, if the defense engineers of those days could build it, would they? Well, of course they did, and in complete secrecy. Now, decades later, here in the dawn of the 21st century, if defense engineers could secretly launch men to Mars, would they? Well, let's examine the evidence, and you decide the answer for yourself. In 2004, filmmaker Cary Conran introduced an imaginative action thriller called Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. This movie's fanciful plot reveals the crazed dream of a mad German scientist to create his own utopian future called the World of Tomorrow. His twisted plan involved launching a giant rocket filled with all species of animals as well as engineered human genomes, the spawn of a new race of superhumans, into space. Upon reaching 100 kilometers altitude, the rocket was set to ignite the atmosphere and incinerate the Earth. Hollywood fiction, of course, reminiscent of James Bond's Moonraker, another movie plot where a mad villain planned to destroy the Earth while crafting his own perfect civilization out in space. Isn't it strange how life sometimes mimics art?
No.
Planet Mars, that diminutive spark of red fire in the night sky that has tantalized the human imagination since time immemorial. The Romans revered Mars as the god of war. Astrologically, Mars is associated with confidence and self-assertion, aggression, sexuality, strength, and ambition. But what is the real truth about the fourth planet orbiting our sun? What secrets does our neighboring planet await to reveal?
I nawet ten Obama może sam nie wiedzieć tego, wiesz.
By the 19th century, telescope resolution was advanced enough to disclose surface features of the red planet. Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli claimed seeing the planet lined with grooves or channels, which he mapped. These strange lines became labeled canals, suggesting a vast irrigation system on Mars, which implied that intelligent creatures lived there. Observations by American astronomer Percival Lowell in 1901 further fueled speculation that a Martian civilization had engineered a complex system of canals to distribute water across its arid, barren surface. Such notions inspired the writings of H.G. Wells and his classic tale, War of the Worlds, which envisioned aggressive Martians seeking to escape their dying planet by invading Earth. This Wells novel has made an indelible impression on our modern culture, first as a notorious radio program in 1938, when Orson Welles triggered a public panic by presenting the fictional dramatization as a live news broadcast. Then later, the tale was again refurbished as two major Hollywood movies. And over the years, Mars has remained a popular media subject. Walt Disney advanced theories about manned exploration of Mars back in the 50s. In 1990, Arnold Schwarzenegger played a Martian colonist with amnesia in Total Recall. And Mission to Mars told the plight of astronauts marooned on the red planet. Most recently, in 2012, Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1917 science fiction classic, John Carter and the Princess of Mars, finally made its grand Hollywood debut. The romantic ideas of an inhabited Mars have given way to more sophisticated scientific analysis. Since the early 1960s, numerous unmanned probes launched by both American and Soviet space agencies have revealed the red planet to be a desolate, lifeless rock. Its surface temperature is much lower than that of Earth, hardly ever rising above the freezing point of water. Mars may have had surface water in ancient times, but evidence suggests that some major cosmic catastrophe left the planet without an atmosphere capable of sustaining life. The asteroid belt between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter is theorized to be the remains of a planet that was destroyed millions of years ago. The scarred Martian surface and its diminished atmosphere may be the result of that disaster. NASA engineers have recently speculated about the possibility of terraforming Mars to restore a more hospitable atmosphere to the planet by releasing moisture trapped as permafrost across the planet's surface. The latest robotic venture to Mars was NASA's Mars Exploration Rover, which landed successfully in 2004. Unfortunately, after 6 years of service, the rover's survey came to a halt when its wheels became trapped in sand. Communication from the rover finally failed altogether in March of 2010. And yet planet Mars still offers curious anomalies that challenge our understanding. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter, making a photographic survey of the Cydonia Mesa, captured a unique formation that has since been labeled the face on Mars. Is it just a random trick of light and shadow, or the remnant of a structure from some lost civilization that once flourished on the Martian surface? As well, strange translucent tubes have been captured in the NASA survey photographs. Are they some bizarre natural formations, or also tantalizing remains of intelligently engineered structures? In January 2008, the Mars rover photographed yet another strange artifact that strongly suggests the sculpture of a person in a sitting or kneeling position among the Martian rocks. It seems the more we learn about our companion planet, the more mysterious it becomes. These mysteries may finally be dispelled in the near future. In a major policy speech at Kennedy Space Center on April 15, 2010, President Barack Obama predicted a manned Mars mission to orbit the planet by the mid-2030s, followed by a landing.
By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. And I expect to be around to see it.
The United States Congress has approved manned missions to the Moon, followed by asteroid exploration in 2025 and Mars in the 2030s. Imagine the high drama when American astronauts ultimately set foot on Mars for the first time in 2035. But will they actually be the first? Or will they be shocked to discover that Mars had already been home to humans from Earth for at least 70 years? In 2010, on Exopolitics Radio, hosted by Alfred Lambermont Weber, incredible revelations about planet Mars were disclosed. Mr. Andrew Basiago, a Cambridge-educated lawyer who practices law in Washington State, and Ms. Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of United States President Dwight D. Eisenhower, boldly revealed astounding claims that a secret Mars base, funded by black-budget military and intelligence sources, has been established as a survival colony in the event that solar flares, nuclear war, or some other catastrophe ends human life on Earth. On Exopolitics Radio, Laura Eisenhower exposed a covert intelligence operation in 2006 to infiltrate her personal life and recruit her for a secret Mars colony project. As well, Andrew Basiago revealed that twice in 1981 he was actually teleported from a CIA facility in California to a secret United States base on Mars. Mr. Basiago termed the cover-up of the Mars colony Mars Gate and called for a congressional investigation of the United States presence on Mars. Ms. Eisenhower stated that Alternative 3, the notion that trillions of dollars of resources are being spent to protect human life by placing it on Mars, should give way to Alternative 4, a new public awakening to achieve a sustainable civilization on Earth. Such claims sound like the wildest fiction, worthy of an Ian Fleming thriller novel or 007 movie. But closer examination of these revelations suggests a more disturbing plausibility. In June of 1977, a documentary edition of Science Report was aired on Anglia
This is
TV
a science report.
that examined
Listen to
Alternative
it.
3,
Jest amerykański
an
angielski.
investigation of rumors that scientists
Listen
had
carefully.
determined
It doesn't
that by the
matter.
early years
For
of
me,
the
it
21st
doesn't
century,
matter.
the Earth's
Oni mówią jak
surface
Niemcy.
would be unable to
Understandable.
support life
Understandable.
due to
All
pollution
is
leading to
understandable.
catastrophic climate change. It was proposed that there
As
were
I
three
think.
alternatives to assure humanity's survival. Alternative 1. The first involved the detonation of nuclear bombs in the stratosphere in order to allow the pollution to escape into space. Alternative 2. The second alternative was the construction of elaborate underground bases. Alternative 3. The third alternative was to populate a survival colony on Mars. Shortly after this video was aired, it was debunked as a hoax, a clever dramatization parading as an investigative news report. However, this fiction was in part based on solid evidence that
Solid
alternatives
evidence.
1, 2, and
Solid
3
evidence.
were
Fikcja się
seriously
okazała
proposed
solidną
programs.
rzeczywistością.
Author, lecturer, researcher Milton William Cooper served as a member of the Office of Naval Security and Intelligence while on duty as a harbor and river patrol boat captain at Da Nang and the Dong Ha River Security Group in Vietnam.
A ty świetnie znasz
William
angielski,
Cooper
ty
was
wszystko
awarded
każde
several
słowo.
medals for his
tak.
combat leadership
Nasi
and
słuchacze tu w
heroism.
Polsce uczą się też przecież tego.
In his book, Behold a Pale Horse, Cooper reveals classified Defense Department files to which he had access during his service with naval intelligence. This briefing data confirmed the
Zakazane
Alternative
do
3 scenario.
publikacji dla ludzi.
A symposium was held in 1957, which was attended by some of the great scientific minds then living. They reached the conclusion that by or shortly after the year 2000, the planet would self-destruct due to increased population and man's
Jak się
exploitation
dowiedzą,
of
to
the
będzie za
environment.
późno, bo już ten koń
The
trojański tu
secret
jest.
executive order of President Eisenhower,
Papować.
MJ-12
Marsjanie
scholars
zaatakują
were ordered to
Ziemię.
study this scenario and make recommendations from their findings. MJ-12 confirmed the findings of the scientists and made 3 recommendations called Alternatives 1, 2, and 3.
Taki dziwny jest
On
on.
May 22nd, 1962, a space probe landed on Mars and
proszę Państwa,
confirmed
mnie
the
na
existence
kasle
of an
wzięło.
environment which could support life. Not long afterward, the construction of a colony on the planet Mars began in earnest. Today, cities exist on Mars, populated by specifically selected people from different cultures and occupations taken from all over the Earth. A public charade of antagonism between the Soviet Union and the United States has been maintained over all these years in order to fund projects in the name of national defense, when in fact we are the closest allies. Curiously, in 1957, the very same year, mentioned in Cooper's classified military files
I on jest z
that
Rosjanami związany,
referenced
ten
the
Obama, bo
Alternative 3
na Marsie oni są
Symposium,
wspólnie.
a
No i
Walt
oni
Disney
też się
television
dogadają,
program
tak jak wiesz.
entitled Mars and
Rosjanie z
Beyond
Ukraińczykami się
publicly
dogadali
stated,
teraz.
today, as we face the serious problems of overpopulation and depletion of natural resources, the possibility of Mars becoming a new frontier is of increasing importance in our plans for the future.
Tak.
Is there any substance to this Alternative 3 urban legend? In 1961, shortly after the discovery of the Van Allen radiation belt that surrounds our planet, Hollywood released Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, a fantastic thriller where the Van Allen belt actually catches fire. To save the planet from roasting, an atomic missile is launched into the belt, extinguishing the blaze. A solution curiously reminiscent of Alternative 1. And today we see our skies laced with chemtrails, used for the alleged purpose of filtering solar radiation because of the depleted ozone layer. Could this be a modern variation of the Alternative 1 objectives? In May 1995, former Defense Department engineer, the late Phil Schneider, revealed The black budget is a secretive budget that garners 25% of the gross national product of the United States.
The black budget.
The black budget currently consumes $1.25 trillion per year. At least this amount is used in black programs, like those concerned with deep underground military bases. Presently, there are 129 deep underground military bases in the United States. Such testimony infers that Alternative 2 is substantial and serious. It's fairly well known that the Defense Department has been building underground facilities even since the days of the Cold War, when threat of nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union seemed a clear and present danger. Markings on the huge boring machines clearly reveal their military utility. According to the testimony of Mr. Basiago and Ms. Eisenhower, Alternative 3 has already progressed far beyond the theory stage, suggesting that fantastic advances in classified space transportation technologies have pushed this project into solid reality as well. Obviously, preserving our human genome is a worthy endeavor. Establishing colonies on Mars or other worlds in space as insurance against unforeseen Earth cataclysms or wars seems a humane, noble pursuit. But is such an admirable project convenient cover for darker ambitions? Does a breakaway military-industrial conglomerate entertain plans to occupy Mars and the rest of the solar system in a covert scheme to advance the territorial ambitions of a hidden totalitarian order? Is a secret fraternity of privileged elites engaged in refashioning humanity into a species of invention? How ironic it would be to find we've launched the War of the Worlds scenario in reverse, with an aggressive army of human invaders from Earth descending upon the Martians. The increasing frequency of natural disasters is making human survival on planet Earth more tenuous. Each year we see more earthquakes, tsunamis, solar flares, severe storms, and volcanic eruptions. But are they man-made? In retrospect, it appears that Western civilization has been deliberately designed to self-destruct by the early years of the 21st century. The economic deterioration, runaway inflation, foreclosures, Wall Street instability, and loan company scandals all seem to be key to a predetermined schedule. As well, the degradation of the environment with massive oil spills, and more recently, the spreading radiation leaks due to the 2011 Japan earthquake, seem to serve a deliberate program of mass population reduction. The insatiable greed mentality of the corporate ruling elite sees the planet and all of its inhabitants as expendable commodities, to be used and discarded like so many styrofoam cups. The hit disaster film 2012 clearly portrays the mentality of the ruling elite, who have commissioned the building of gigantic arks to ride out the monstrous tidal waves that ravage the planet. Arks built exclusively for the safety of the corporate and political masters. Could it be that the missing $9 trillion that the Federal Reserve could not account for in 2009 were actually monies covertly financing space arks, built for the ruling elite to fly them safely to a sanctuary refuge on Mars, a bankster plan to get out of Dodge? Former director of Lockheed's top-secret skunkworks facility at famed Area 51, Ben Rich, who was in charge of operations from 1975 to 1991, stated, "We now have the capability to travel to the stars. First, you have to understand that we will not get to the stars using chemical propulsion. The quantum secret is that all points in space and time are connected. In physics, a wormhole, an Einstein-Rosen bridge, is a hypothetical, topological feature of space-time that would be fundamentally a shortcut through space-time. Whistleblower testimonies confirm that secret defense projects have made practical application of wormhole portals.
Wormhole, czyli tak zwane dziury robaczkowe.
According to the testimony of Henry Deacon to Project Camelot, the technology of the military-industrial complex is currently dozens of years ahead of mainstream physics, which is published in journals in the public domain. There are projects dealing with subjects beyond the belief or experience, beyond the imagination of many public domain physicists. As well, Black Project insider Henry Deacon confirmed Andrew Basiago's claim that the military-industrial complex has mastered teleportation technologies with operational jump gates. Travel across large distances is best done using portals. Anything else is it's just inefficient. One of the portals connects to Mars, and it's a stable connection, no matter where Earth and Mars are in their orbits. We have a base there established in the early 60s.
Kiedy została ta baza
we have a
zbudowana?
number of
Early
bases.
60s.
Transportation is by two means: stargates for personnel and small items, spacecraft for larger items of freight. The alternative fleet is codenamed Solar Warden.
Solar Warden. Czyli
Existence of this alternative fleet was also verified by Project Camelot whistleblower Gary McKinnon. This British citizen and computer science genius, thought to have hacked into 53 United States government agencies' computer systems, said he was eventually able to hack into the United States Space Command network, where he found evidence of an extraterrestrial mission. I found a list of officers' names, he claims, under the heading Non-Terrestrial Officers. What I think it means is not Earth-based. I found a list of fleet-to-fleet transfers and a list of ship names. I looked them up. They weren't United States Navy ships. What I saw made me believe they have some kind of spaceship off-planet. Technologies to achieve such an audacious project have been in the works at least since the early 50s. Jealously guarded research and development operations involving captured alien spacecraft have advanced revolutionary quantum space flight propulsion systems, as well as techniques for altering space and time to form transportation portals. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan was briefed about ET technologies. Some information was evaluated with the idea of using the gained data to advance our own space technology and future space programs. The EBs can travel that great distance by means of space tunnels. They seem to be able to bend the distance from one point in space to another. Researcher Bob Dean states, Richard Hoagland is convinced that Mars is covered with ruins. Well, it is, but it's not just ruins. There are things going on that planet, on the surface, under the surface, continually so. From his book, UFO Contact from Reticulum, author Wendell Stevens also shared disturbing reference to a secret manned base on Mars. In 1978, William J. Herman, a born-again Christian living in Charleston, South Carolina, became a UFO experiencer. At the time, Herman was deacon of his Southern Baptist Conference Church. After several ongoing UFO contacts with gray aliens, Herman received an anonymous phone call warning him to keep silent about his UFO contacts. Mars can support life, human life. It's been proven. The moon once held colonies of scientists, and a probe landed on Mars on May 22, 1962. The Committee at Residence is a joint government paramilitary technological conglomerate. The CIA is small fry compared to them. God, the KGB is small fry compared to them. They're watching you. Alternative 3, the Committee at Residence. The committee knows the UFOs know about everything. The violations, atrocities, batch consignments, everything. They've tried suppressing UFO data, but it can't be held down anymore. Too much pressure, too much at stake. When the atmosphere vaporizes its shields, all life will perish. Perish, do you hear? Richard Hoagland, former space advisor to Walter Cronkite and CBS television, confirmed our civilian space agency harbors a secret agenda. The NASA that we've known for 50 years has been a lie. The governmental institution known as NASA is a department of the executive branch ultimately answerable solely to the President of the United States, an agency created through the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958. NASA ostensibly is a civilian agency exercising control over aeronautical and space activities sponsored by the United States. But contrary to common public and media perception that NASA is an open, strictly civilian scientific institution, is the legal fact that the space agency was quietly founded as a direct adjunct to the Department of Defense. This is directly contrary to everything we've been led to believe regarding NASA for over 50 years now. Integral to secret space-based defense strategy planning has been the establishment of bases on both the Moon and Mars. Once again, it is important to restate that the conjectures showcased in this essay are not offered as proof that our government institutions have in fact established operational bases on Mars. However, it may be significant to note that in 2001, the National Science Foundation and the Department of Commerce organized a workshop for major corporations and defense contractors to review the impending arrival of what Newt Gingrich called the Age of Transitions. Concepts discussed at this workshop were published in a report entitled Converging Technologies for Improving Human Performance, Nanotechnology, Biotechnology, Information Technology, and Cognitive Science. Visions laid out in this workshop included robotics,
No tak, bo jeszcze tej filozofii brak.
artificial intelligence,
Jeszcze tobie
life
tej filozofii
extension,
brak.
brain enhancement, virtual reality, genetic engineering, and even teleportation.
Widzisz? Proszę. Na Marsa, teleportują się.
No.
One of the important issues that Andrew Basiago emphasized in his call for a Marsgate investigation was the practical advantage of teleportation
O, patrz,
technologies.
masz, pokazane.
Present
Teleportacja.
forms of mechanical transportation
On
are
widziałeś.
clumsy, antiquated,
On widział.
expensive, petroleum-dependent contraptions that foul the environment. Teleportation offers an economical, planet-friendly alternative that can replace such outdated technologies. So perhaps being whisked down a wormhole to another world is not such far-fetched fantasy as we might think. With 2012's science fiction adventure movie, John Carter, was Disney Corporation actually sharing a glimpse of what state-of-the-art space travel has become.
No i dobrze, przynajmniej mamy takie
Aha.
przybliżone o co chodzi. A teraz masz o Obamie na Marsie.
Now wait till you listen to this story. Two former participants in the CIA's Mars visitation program back in the early 1980s
To jest młody
say that
Obama na
President
Marsie.
Barack Obama was enrolled in their Mars training class in the 1980, was among the young Americans from the program who they later encountered on the Martian surface after reaching Mars via the jump rope. Andrew Bashago, he's been on the program before, a lawyer in the state of Washington who served in DARPA's time travel program, Project Pegasus, in the 70s when he was a youngster. And William Stillings, a 44-year-old now, who was tapped by the Mars program for his technical expertise, have confirmed, they say, that the president was enrolled in their Mars training class when he was a teenager, and that each later encounter of the president during those visits to U.S. facilities on Mars took place from 81 to 83. Quite a story. Up next, you'll have a series of special guests coming on the program, including the great-great-granddaughter of the late President Dwight Eisenhower and what she had to go through. Andrew Bashago is next on Coast to Coast AM. Are you going to be on a Coast to Coast ride tonight? Andrew Bashago, lawyer from the state of Washington, as I mentioned, rising figure in the truth movement. He holds 5 degrees, including a BA in history from UCLA, Master of Philosophy from Cambridge. Now, back in the 70s, Andy was a child participant in DARPA's time travel program, Project Pegasus. In the 1980s, claims that he visited Mars for the CIA's Mars program. Andy is now the president of Project Pegasus and the Mars Anomaly Research Society. Throughout the night, we'll have some other guests on with Andy, but here he is right now, Andrew Bashago. And welcome back. How are you, Andrew?
Hi, George. I'm excellent.
Good. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing over the last few months.
My truth campaign proceeds apace. I think it's fair to say that it's entered the mainstream. Recently, I had the pleasure of working with Governor Jesse Ventura.
Good guy.
Yeah, really. He really has a heart of gold. And so we taped a segment of conspiracy theory in some of my old haunts in New Mexico that Project Pegasus took me to as a child 40 years ago. We filmed in Santa Fe, right in front of the Baton Memorial Building, which you may recall was the place they were actually trying to teleport us back when time-space exploration was a new thing in the Defense Department. On the other hand, I've also had the privilege of having my Project Pegasus experiences subjected to a disinformational attack by the History Channel. I don't think you've really arrived until that's happened. And so they recently did William Shatner did a segment for his show, Weird or What, in which they actually invented an alternate set of experiences that they alleged that I had. And so I don't think they really defame you on the History Channel until you've arrived or until they're convinced that you're telling the truth.
Well, you know, what I do, Andy, in this case, and you know you've been on the program before with me, I want our listeners to make up their own mind. I mean, because, you know, they're going to hear your story, and they're going to hear one tonight from you and Bill Stillings. That is truly unbelievable for people to grasp, but I want them to hear it from you. And then they can make up their own mind. And I think that's fair, don't you?
It certainly is. You know, and I think that undergirding this is the fact that really between what the public has been told the U.S. government has achieved and what it has secretly Projects Agency, or DARPA, that was initiated in the late 1970s. Most of its activities were in the early 1970s. And it was essentially the U.S. time-space exploration program at the time of its emergence. It was working with adults and children, but also sort of training the next cadre of chrononauts for the U.S. government, really in 2 technical areas, in the area of Tesla teleportation and in the area of chronovision, which is the use of electro-optical devices to create holograms of past and future events. So I was one of the 140 American school children who was brought into Project Pegasus in 1969.
Why kids? Why not adults?
Well, they were using adults for many of the activities in the program, and there were 4 major reasons why they were using kids. First, they were testing the mental and physical effects of Tesla teleportation on children. For example, let's say they had at some point to move the children of our executive branch officials via teleportation. They wanted baseline data on the impact of teleportation on the mental and physical functioning of school-age children. They also needed us because they needed small cooperative human beings, because the holograms that the chronovisors were generating would collapse when larger human beings, namely adults, were used inside the hologram, which kind of created a window to a past or future event. So that was a critical form of intelligence gathering, and so they were giving us specialized training because when we were in the hologram would not collapse, and then we could use that as a form of intelligence gathering regarding past or future events. We were clearly also trainees in the sense that we were told that some of us would go on to be part of a fully fledged time-space program by the time that we had been put through the Naval Academy and were ready to graduate. They expected that Project Pegasus would have emerged by then into a fully fledged time-space program that would be undertaken secretly to rival the overt space program under NASA.
Did they need you to come back and give them feedback? I mean, could they have sent, primates instead of little kids?
Oh, we were very much information gatherers. In fact, we were given specialized training on tachistoscopes, which were speed learning machines that had been developed by the Office of Naval Research. Essentially, we were schooled in everything that had happened in science and society from the time of the High Renaissance, which was, let's say, around the year 1450. And so we were schooled in a curriculum called Galileo, so that when we were, for example, traveling in the past, we would be able to identify things and kind of link up facts, and we were always debriefed after a certain experience in time travel concluded, whether it was teleportation or chronovision, or one of the several other technologies that were had already been developed by 1970.
Andrew, tell us what the CIA's Mars visitation program is.
Well, in 1972, around the time that I left Pegasus, there was another time travel technology that had emerged. In the labs in New Mexico that I was taken to, there were small devices about the size, let's say, of microwave ovens, in which documents from the East Coast were being sent. Now, sometime between 1972 and the late 70s, that technology had been modeled into jump rooms. A jump room is essentially an elevator-like device that you stand in, and while you're standing in this sort of freight elevator-like rectilinear box, it morphs into a cylinder and arrives somewhere else. Now, how this is accomplished, I have no idea. It was never explained to those of us who were placed in the CIA's Mars visitation program beginning in the summer of 1980. But by the late 1970s, if for example, were to use Michael Relf's account of taking the jump room to Mars, by 1976, this technology existed. My experiences vis-a-vis Mars began in the summer of 1980 with a group of young people who time has shown ended up being a fairly illustrious group of individuals.
Including Barack Obama, who went by the name of Barry Soetoro, right?
Yes. William Stillings, who was one of my classmates, is going to be on later, and I are 100% certain that when we asked this particular individual his name and when we were socializing with him after the group of 10 young people in the program, actually we should say that we were getting our schooling under Major Ed Dames, a Coast regular.
Our Ed Dames?
Same individual. Ed was then, this was before his work in remote viewing, he was then a scientific and technical intelligence officer for the U.S. Army. And Brett Stillings and I and 8 other young people attended a Mars training course under Ed Dames that was held at a small college in Northern California called the College of the Siskiyous.
And what do you mean by Mars training course?
Well, Ed gave us about 3 weeks of factual instruction regarding everything that somebody who was going to be sent to Mars by a jump room should know. And so he was going into some of the history of the planet Mars, its geology, its hydrology, its humanoid and animal life forms. There was a major segment, for example, on the predator species on Mars that we should look out for, those that we could outrun and those that...
On nawet teraz ruszał się, ten tak mówił, ten w okularach.
So it was merely
Coś
a
mówił.
training seminar held in the second 2 weeks of August and the first week of September at the College of the Siskiyous, which is a small community college at the foot of Mount Shasta in northern
Oni się tam podśmiewają.
Ed Dames. You're sure it's Ed Dames?
We're absolutely sure it was Ed. We were socializing. First, Brett and I found ourselves at the campground at Lake Siskiyou. Into the second week, we were all living at the dorms at the College of the Siskiyous. And then about 5 of us and the parent that was in attendance moved to the Finlandia Motel in Mount Shasta, the city of Mount Shasta. And Ed came by some of our evening parties a number of times, and we're absolutely certain that it was Ed Dames, although Brett and I are fairly certain that back then he was Captain Ed Dames.
You know, he has never told us this story on the program, ever.
Well, you know, this is classified information, and I think this is really, in a sense, George, I think you have a sense of the magnitude of this interview. You know, this is the first time that a sitting United States president has not only been identified as a participant in an intelligence program decades before he took office, but also has been linked to the secret space program. So I can appreciate Ed's lack of candor, because after all, he was an adult when he signed.
Także jeszcze czeka nas niespodzianka w tym świecie. Nie agresja, tylko może być jako wizyta. Marsjan. Marty, I am Marty the Martian, I am Marty the Martian, I come from Mars, I am going to kill you! With siekiera. Taka piosenka.
Now, I could see Matt Dredge's headlines tomorrow. Barack Obama was on the surface of Mars.
Of that, Brett and I are absolutely certain. We're not only certain that when we asked this individual his name and befriended him, we were literally
Surface z powierzchni Marsa. Surface of Mars.
Which was the Indonesian name that Barack Obama was using before he selected his birth father's name.
I am certain that he comes from Mars.
What did he tell you about why the government wanted to send civilians to Mars? Why is this jump?
It was really quite strange what was going on. We were brought into it on such an emergency basis that our late fathers were actually financing our trips from Southern California, our initial trip from our homes in Southern California to the Mount Shasta region. They were literally paying for our movement there via, out of pocket.
Room and board, all that stuff.
Well, just in terms of financing the trip up there.
Just to get you there.
They were going to be reimbursed by the CIA. Ed explained during the 2-week seminar that there were a number of sort of internested reasons why we were putting civilians on the surface of Mars. Civilians, I might add, American citizens of different ages and races and backgrounds and so forth. Generally speaking, he stated that the United States government had decided to establish a defense regime on Mars, protecting the Earth from threats from outer space. Okay. Now, I don't mean necessarily extraterrestrial beings. I mean all manner of threats to Earth, including, for example, the prospect that Earth might be hit by an asteroid.
Okay.
So they wanted to use Mars, which is on a regular orbit with Earth, as kind of a staging base for that extraterrestrial defense regime. In furtherance of establishing that, they also wanted to put as many civilians as possible, not soldiers, not diplomats, not astronauts per se, but civilians on the surface of Mars, so that a basis would be created in public international law for the United States government to later assert a claim of territorial sovereignty over Mars.
And they were colonizing Mars.
Yes, 30 years ago. And I should add that also in furtherance of sort of normalizing human relations with Mars, or in expectation, that is, of more human beings from Earth going to Mars and even settling there, they wanted to use us essentially to acclimate the Martian humanoid and animal species to our presence, because they were anticipating placing a U.S. colony there. And as our guest during the last hour, Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, will describe, that base already exists, because indeed she was invited to join that secret colony in 2006 and 2007.
But did not go.
But chose not to go.
Now, explain to us, when we get back into more of the, the training and what the Major Dames was working on, who you said was a captain at the time. What's the jump room, and how does it work?
It's remarkably simple. The jump room that we were using was literally the elevator at a Hughes aircraft facility that was located at 999 North Sepulveda Boulevard in El Segundo, California, immediately south of the Los Angeles International Airport.
Okay. I know where that is.
The elevator, just right across West Imperial Avenue there from the southern perimeter of LAX. The jump room was literally the elevator room. We would take the elevator up to the 5th floor, check in, give our name, first and last, our social security number, our date of birth. We would then go up to the 8th floor, and the room would essentially become illuminated, where we could see that something was going on outside the walls of the elevator.
Okay.
And about 10 minutes into the journey to Mars, the rectilinear structure of the elevator would begin morphing into a cylinder, and the ceiling would transit so that we had to kind of adjust our posture as if we were walking through, let's say, a cylindrical water main, as the box-like elevator then morphed into more of a pipe-like cylinder.
Like a portal.
Yeah, a portal. And the ceiling, which had now translated into the end of the cylinder, had a kind of a swirling pattern. This was during, let's say, the middle 10 minutes of a 20 or 30-minute jump to Mars.
When you got there, were you outside? Did you have to have breathing apparatus on? What was that like?
Well, actually, what was strange is we found ourselves in another elevator-like facility that greeted us, that essentially received the jump room. Now, how this was done, I have no idea. I'm not a physicist, I'm a lawyer. But that's what was happening. The door would then open.
No windows at that time, right?
No windows. There wasn't a later jump room. But the initial one that I was sent to was sort of one story below ground in a kind of a cavern. The modern infrastructure of the jump room had been placed inside this cavern under the surface of Mars. And as instructed, I walked out of the jump room to the right, up a stone staircase, and then through a kind of a dugout, almost like a baseball dugout, behind a statue on the surface. And I then walked through the eye sockets of that head-like structure on the surface, or skull-like statue. And I found myself literally on the surface of Mars. So we were reaching Mars in a trans-physical way. That is to say that the material that the jump room was made of was doing things that other substances on Earth have never done.
How long were you on Mars then?
Well, I went up in 2 training jumps, and I initially was provided a respiration device. I was greeted there on the surface by 3 Earthlings.
Military or just folks?
No, these were 3 civilians working for CIA who were on the surface.
Okay.
I noticed that none of them had a respiration device on like I did, and I was actually shouting through my mask. I had forgotten that there was a communication device in the mask. Can I take my mask off? And the person who was sort of just standing right in front of me indicated that I could. He was actually laughing his head off. I was shouting. And when I did, I found that I could breathe on the surface of Mars. It was close breathing. It felt kind of like you feel at, let's say, 10,000 feet.
Okay. A little lightheaded?
I beg your pardon?
A little lightheaded?
Yeah, one felt sort of like the early stages of altitude sickness, a little spaced out, a little difficulty breathing, maybe a little anxious because of the brain being signaled that Mars doesn't have the rich oxygen component in its atmosphere that Earth does. So that's something we always had to adjust to. I mean, the swirling at the end of the cylinder, when the jump room morphed into a cylinder, already kind of created a sort of mental torsion that we had to adjust to. Sometimes it was actually kind of nauseating.
Andrew, we're going to bring in William Stillings to join you in just a moment. He, too, went with you to Mars. We'll be back. And we're talking about the incredible program, apparently, the CIA's Mars Visitation Program. Up next, along with Andrew Bashago, William Stillings joins us. He went, too, when he was a teenager. And we'll be back on Coast to Coast AM. And joining Andrew Bashago this hour, William Brett Stillings, born in Virginia, raised in the intelligence community, the son of a father employed at Lockheed and NASA's JPL. He was a mechanical prodigy who repaired television sets without instruction at age 4. I don't even think that's a field anymore. Nobody repairs TVs. He has served in the United States Navy, like I have, and worked in the biotech field. In 1980, Brett was enrolled in the Mars training class that included Andrew, what they say is Barack Obama. Someone by the name of Regina Duncan will get the reason on her and sent to Mars from 81 to 83. Here's William Stillings on Coast to Coast. Hello, Brett. How are you?
Doing great, George. Thank you.
Good. And